let's talk about the materials that you're going to need to knit this top. So first off, you're going to need some worsted weight yarn. Here I've got Sanaskan Line, which is a really lovely summer blend. It consists of 53% cotton, 33% viscose, and then 14% linen, which will give us a really lovely drape. Then you're going to need some scrap yarn for the provisional cast on. Choose any yarn you like, this is not really important. Next, 4mm circular needles. My cable length here is 60 centimeters. We're also going to need a crochet hook for the provisional cast on, a tape measure, and then something to put your stitches on hold on. Then we're going to need some stitch markers, and then you're going to need a tapestry needle. So I've got these handy plastic ones, but any sort of tapestry needle will do. Let's start doing our provisional cast on. So you're going to need your scrap yarn and your crochet hook. When we're doing the provisional cast on, you need to make a chain, a crochet chain, with a couple more stitches than what you need according to the pattern. So for my size in the pattern, it says that I need to cast on 28 stitches. So I'm just going to make an additional 4 more stitches. So 1, 2 for the beginning, 1, 2, 3. The hook size doesn't really matter that much, so just choose whatever you have at hand. So once you've got that amount of stitches on, you're just gonna get that off the needle and then take this thread and pull through your last stitch and just tighten. Now you have a crochet chain. Next, we're ready to start working with our main yarn into the crochet chain. So here's our crochet chain. So here you need to just pick whether you want to be picking up stitches in that loop above or in the loop underneath, and then you need to keep that consistent. So I'm gonna go into the 3rd stitch here, like so, and then I'll take our main yarn, wrap around the needle, and then pull through a loop. Okay, we got our first loop. Then I'm just gonna hold this here so that it doesn't slip away from me and continue into the next loop. Yarn around the needle, pull up a loop, needle and through, pull the yarn around, wrap the yarn around the needle and pull through. Going into the next chain, wrapping the yarn around the needle and then pulling through a loop. And I'm going to continue doing this until I've got my 28 stitches. So now I've got my 28 stitches on my needles, and I am going to turn and start the setup row. So at this point you probably also want to mark that this is the beginning. I'm going to get my beginning of row marker out, this cute little cat, and we're going to start purling across for our setup row. I'm at the last 3 stitches of my setup row, and I'm just gonna, to make sure that this doesn't come undone when I work it, I'm just gonna hold the yarn end here so that that's nice and tight. So we've got the setup row here, we're gonna turn, and now we are going to work 2 rows without any increases, but we are going to start shaping the I-cord edges. So the way that we're gonna do that, we're gonna knit across here until the 2 very last stitches. And once we're here, we're gonna slip these stitches with the yarn at the back. And once you've done that a couple of times, you're gonna start seeing that it forms a really lovely edge. So we are just knitting across until we get to those 2 last stitches on our needles. Here we are at the end of that row, so we have the 2 last stitches here, which I'm going to slip purlwise while keeping the yarn at the back, like so. Now we're turning the work and we're going to purl across all the way to the 2 last stitches, and then we're going to slip these stitches with yarn in front this time. Here we are at the end of the row 2 where we purled across, and now we are going to be slipping these 2 stitches, this time with yarn in front. Like so. So slipping the stitches at the end of the row is going to give us a really lovely I-cord looking edge on the sides. So now we are going to start the increases. So we're going to increase 2 stitches on every right side row. So we're going to knit 2, do 1 increase, and knit all the way till the 2 last stitches and do 1 increase, and then slip these stitches. And knit 2, and then we are going to do a left leaning increase, meaning that the increase will sort of lean that way, so we'll push out from the I-cord edge, which will make this sort of I-cord edge that we're making even more distinctive, and it's gonna look really lovely. So to do make 1 left, we take our right needle and go under like that and pick up this thread in between these stitches, right? Like so, and then we place that on the needle, and now we are going to knit into the back loop of that. So I find it quite tricky to just go straight into the back loop. See, it's quite, it's not really, well, now I did it, but anyway, what I like to do as a little hack, I like to just insert it at the front, and then I just do this to get to the back loop, and then you wrap the yarn around your needle and pull through a loop. And you can see that it's leaning to the left, right? And now we are going to knit to the 2 last stitches. Now we are at the 2 last stitches of the row. We are going to make a right leaning increase this time. And the way we do that is that we grab the yarn with our left needle and pull up a loop like so. And then we knit into this leg. This can be trickier. It's so splitty, this yarn. So what I like to do is that with my fingers, I sort of grab the work and pinch it, and then I sort of bring it up like that. So we have more room here, and then I try to knit it like that. Very splitty. Yes, we made it. Okay, we're gonna wrap the yarn around a needle and pull up a loop. And as you can see, this is leaning to the right. So it's leaning away from these 2 I-cord stitches. For the last 2 stitches, we are going to slip them with the yarn in back, like so. The wrong side is quite easy. No increases here. We're just going to purl all the way across till we get to the last 2 stitches, which we are going to slip. And then we are just going to continue working these 2 rows for however long it says in the pattern. So we've purled across the row, and now we've reached our 2 last stitches. So with our yarn in front this time, we're going to slip those purlwise like so. Then we turn. So after working those 2 rows, we should have increased 2 stitches in total. So we are just going to continue now doing these 2 rows on repeat for a couple of times until we get to a certain point. So in the pattern it says how many times you're supposed to repeat it, and it also gives you a total stitch count, so you can count the stitches to see if you lose track of how many times you repeated the row. Hello, we are back. So at this point you should have finished your first increase section, and we're about to start the second one. So unfortunately I managed to delete the footage when I did the second one, which is quite annoying. So I'm just going to show you how to do it here. So the first row is the same that you've been doing all this time. So you will knit 2, and then you make 1 left, you knit till the 2 last stitches, and then you make 1 right and slip 2 with the yarn and back. But now I'm going to show you on the wrong side. So now for this next increase section, we'll be increasing on every row, also the wrong side row. So after we've done the repeat, we will have increased 4 stitches. So I'm going to show you how you do these stitches on the wrong side row. So humor me for a second and just pretend that we've done the first RS row, and now we're on row 2 of that second increase section. So I'm going to be purling 2 stitches, and then I'm going to make 1 left purl. So I do the same as I do as if it was knitting it, right? Like that, but now I'm gonna purl the stitch. So this is a little bit tricky. So the way that I like to do it, I sort of scrunch this section up towards the needle so that there's extra room here, and then we go through this back loop like so, we put the yarn at the front and then we get that underneath like so. So that was make one left purlwise, and then we're going to purl to the 2 last stitches on the row. So since I'm already knitting in the round, I'm just going to purl. And let's pretend we're at the 2 last stitches of the row. Now I'm going to show you how to do a make one right purlwise. Just like with a knit one, I'm pulling up a loop with my left needle, but now since I'm purling, I'm putting the yarn at the front and I'm putting this needle behind the yarn and up through that loop, and then I wrap the yarn around the needle and pull up a loop. Those are the 2 rows that you'll just keep repeating until you've reached X amount of stitches. Okay, we are back. I just completed the second section of increases for the armhole and our work is looking like this. So now it's time to break the yarn and put these stitches on hold, and then we'll do this one more time to shape the back panel. I've got my little scissor here and I'm going to cut the yarn and then place these stitches on my stitch holder like so. So I just finished my second panel, so now we've got 2 identical panels here, and for this next round what we're going to be doing, we're going to be joining them in the round at the same time as we're going to be casting on I-cord underarm stitches. This is where we left off. We were on the back row. We haven't worked these 2 last stitches, right? Because we're gonna slip them normally, but we're actually going to be placing these on a marker, and I'll explain why a little bit later. Just trust me for now. And then we're going to be knitting across until we get to these last 2 stitches here, and then we're going to start doing the I-cord cast on method, which is very exciting, and I don't see that often, so it's always nice to do. Fun. Okay, so we've reached our last 2 stitches here, and now we're going to be casting on stitches for the underarm using the I-cord cast on method. We go into the first stitch and knit into the front loop. We don't drop it, we also knit into the back loop like that. Let me show that again. We knit into the front loop, and without dropping the stitch, we knit into the back loop of the same stitch. And that looks like this. And then we drop it, and then we knit one. Then we place 2 stitches back on our left needle, and we do that again. So we keep doing that until we've got the required amount of stitches that we need for the underarm. So knit into the front loop, knit into the back loop, drop the stitch, then knit one. And then we place the 2 last stitches back on the needle and repeat. So I've casted on the underarm stitches that I needed using the I-cord cast on method, and now it's time to join the other panel. I had the stitches on hold on one of these stitch holders, and I'm going to be placing them back on the needle with the right side facing me so that I can start working and connecting these here. Sometimes when you place stitches back on the needle, you twist them. So I just want to make sure that if you're placing stitches back on the needle as well, like I am, that you're not twisting your stitches. Just make sure that once you place them, that the front leg here of the stitch is at the very front, right? So it's crossing over sort of like a lady doing this, walking. Okay, so I'm back. We've done the underarm cast on stitches, and we've got our front panel placed back on the needle, ready to work. So later on, after we finished everything, we're going to be grafting these I-cord stitches here together with these here using the Kitchener stitch. So for now, we are just going to be placing them on hold on a stitch marker. I've placed the stitches on hold on the stitch marker, so the 2 last stitches that we had for the cast on here, and then the 2 first stitches of the next panel are on hold. And now we're going to start working across this panel, knit across, and don't worry that your yarn is attached to a stitch. That's totally fine. So here we are at the end of the last panel, and we're going to be casting on I-cord underarm stitches here as well. Knit into the front loop of the first stitch, then without dropping, knit into the back loop, drop the stitch, knit into the last stitch. Then place it back on the needle and repeat. Now we've casted on the required amount of stitches and we are back at the beginning of round. So what we're going to do before we continue is to place these two last I-cord stitches onto our marker here. We are going to be grafting these together using the Kitchener stitch later on. Since this is the beginning of round, we will get our very cute and distinctive beginning of round marker. Isn't this fun? And we will be knitting from now on until we've reached the desired length of the body. Hello, so now it's time to work some bust starts. I'm doing it for the instructions for B to C cup. From my beginning of round marker, I'm gonna go backwards and count 20 stitches. So this here is gonna be my front, and then I'm gonna put a marker. And I'm going to be doing 4 short rows back and forth here. So we're knitting flat while we're doing these bust starts. I'm also going to be doing the same on the other side, just here. So this is sort of equivalent to where we have the beginning of round marker, right? It's the beginning of our armhole stitches. I placed a marker there, and then I'm just counting 20 stitches towards the front, just like we have on this side. Let's begin. First, we are starting from the beginning of row marker here, and we're going to be knitting all the way until marker here, and then we're going to do a shadow wrap short row. It's really nice. It's kind of invisible. So yeah, I'm just going to knit to that first marker, and then I'll see you there. Okay, so now I've knit to marker 3, and I'm gonna take that off. We are going to go into the stitch below and lift up the right leg like this. Make sure that that's knitwise on the needle like this, so this leg needs to be in front. And then we're gonna knit that stitch like so and place it back on the left needle. Here we have our shadow stitch. So now we're going to turn our work and work all the way to the other marker here at front. So now we've purled across the front and we are 2 stitches away from where we'll be turning. So I'm just going to purl these 2 stitches, take off that marker. Then we are going to slip the next stitch purlwise, keeping the yarn in front, like so. We are going to take the head of that stitch and place it on our needle like this, and we'll purl that stitch like this. And with the yarn in front, we are going to be slipping those 2 stitches across like that, and then we turn our work. You can see the stitch should be looking like this, a sort of hanging out together. Now we're going to be knitting all the way to our shadow stitch turn, which is here. You can see these 2 stitches hanging out together. So here we are at the front again, and this is our shadow wrap stitch. So we're going to be knitting 1 here, and then to work this one, we're simply just going to be knitting 2 together. And now we've closed our short row shadow wrap stitch. So we just knit our shadow wrap turn, and then we'll be working 4 stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the 5th stitch, we're gonna take the leg from the stitch underneath, which is this one, and place that on the needle knitwise. We will be working that like so, and placing that back on the needle, and then we turn. And we'll purl across until we get to our shadow wrap stitch over here. Okay, so we've purled across the front, and you can see that our shadow stitch is here. So we're going to be purling 1, and then we're just going to be purling these 2 together to close the short row stitch, like so. We're going to purl 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for the 5th stitch, we're going to slip it purlwise with the yarn in front, like so. We're going to go into the head of the stitch, pick it up on our left needle, and we're going to purl that, like so. Then with the yarn in front, we're going to slip those 2 stitches back on the left needle, and we're going to turn, and then we're going to be knitting across here all the way till we reach our next shadow stitch. which is here. I'll keep doing these 2 rows until I've gone all the way to my beginning of round marker and worked a shadow stitch here, and also till I've gone all the way till first marker and knit a shadow stitch here as well. So for the first round, after we've done the short rows, we're just going to be knitting, and then once we hit a short row turn, we'll just knit those 2 together. If you are optioning for a straight body, you're just going to be knitting like this all the way till you've reached your desired length. But if you are doing the A-line shaping, you'll be increasing 4 stitches every 8th row. You can either just knit straight down and it will still be nice and drapey, but if you want even more drape, and if you want like a slight A-line shape to the top, then you also have the option to add lifted increases underneath the armholes. So I'm going to show you how in a minute. So we've got, this is our beginning of round marker, and these are the 8 underarm stitches that we casted on earlier. And on this version, I've been putting in lifted increases so that it will give that really nice A-line shape, which will give us even more flow. So we've got these on the other armhole as well. So what we do, we're going to knit up until the marker. And then here, we are going to take the right leg of the stitch below and place that on the needle, like so. And then we are going to knit that. And it looks like this. I just slipped the last marker, and now we're going to be doing a left leaning lifted increase. So we're not going to be picking up in the stitch underneath, we're going to be picking up in the second stitch underneath. So we're going to pick up the left leg and place that on the needle, knit twice, and then we're going to knit that. So there you have it. And we'll do that underneath the other armhole as well. And we're going to be doing that every 8th row. We're going to be adding 2 increases underneath the armhole. So 4 increases on that 8th row in total. For the bind off here, I'm just doing a regular bind off method, but what I'm doing is that I went up a needle size. So this is 5mm, and I'm doing the bind off quite tight, but since I'm doing it on 5mm, it's going to look really nice and neat if I keep a tight tension here. So here I am at the very last stitch of the bind off. So I pulled that last stitch off the needles, and I'm going to be putting the thread through the loop like so, and then tightening this way. So you can see that there's a final loop that's created, and once that sort of looks like the other loops here, I'm going to stop pulling, and I'm going to connect it with the very beginning of the bind off, just so that it looks a little bit neater here. It's a very small but significant finishing touch. Okay, so I'm going to go into the first stitch from this side, from the front. So I'm going to go into the first stitch behind like this and pull the needle through. And then I'm going to go into the very last stitch inside like this. So this way sort of emulates an actual stitch. Do you see that? And then we tighten it so that it looks like it has the same tension. And then I'm going to go ahead and secure this loose end. So if you're choosing to go with a double folded hem, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna start at the beginning of the round purling stitches, and we're gonna go all the way around until we've had 1 round of purl stitches. This will make it so that the hem folds over quite nicely. So here we are at the end of that. We're gonna slip our marker, and now we are going to knit. So you can knit to however long you want your hem to be. Here you can see how it folds over. The purl stitch really creates this lovely finish. I really like it. It looks very elegant. And we are going to continue knitting until we've got our desired amount of stitches. So for me, I've got a quite big hem here, This is 4 centimeters. You can of course do shorter if you want. So now we are going to bind off the stitches quite loosely. I'm using a method here that I'm really fond of, where basically you knit one and then you put your left needle through the stitches, yarn over, and then you pull through that yarn over. So again, you knit one, you've got 2 stitches on your right needle, you put your left needle into the stitches, yarn over, and you pull through a loop. This method is really lovely for creating like a loose bind off, and I would really recommend doing a loose bind off because you're going to sew these stitches down later. So here we're at the last 2 stitches of our bind off. This always feels nice, doesn't it? I'm going to make sure that I've got enough yarn to sew these stitches down. And I'm going to secure that last stitch by pulling the yarn through. We've got a tapestry needle, and now I'm going to connect these 2 stitches because as you can see there's quite a big gap here. So I want to emulate that knit loop that a knit stitch has. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to go through that second stitch. You can see that a loop is starting to form here. We've got half of the loop, and to complete the loop, I'm gonna go into that first stitch like so. So from above, pulling the yarn through. So now you can see we've got a nice little knit stitch here. With the hem folded over, we can start sewing the stitches down. So I'm gonna go in through 1 stitch of the body, like this, and you want to make sure that you're more or less doing catching the stitches on the same line, right? Like this, and just go through all the way. And the last step of this process is to weave in your ends. I'm just going up, down, all around. So now I've managed to get all my provisional cast on stitches on my needle. I'm also making sure that they are placed correctly, so with the right leg in front. Now we're going to make probably the tiniest provisional cast on you've ever seen, consisting of 2 stitches. So I'm getting my scrap yarn here, and I'm just going to do a couple of crochet chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's enough. Then we're going to get our yarn, and then I'm going to pull up 2 loops from the provisional cast on. I'm going in here, wrapping the yarn around my needle and pulling up a loop. I'm going to do that one more time. So we've got 2 stitches here, and now we are going to work this in here. And actually, so what we're doing, the reason why we're doing provisional cast on is that we're going to start here and knitting across here, and then once we get to these 2 stitches, we're going to merge them with our I-cord. But then later on we need to go back and do some Kitchener stitch to attach these ones. Okay, so I'm going to start by getting a stitch marker to put these 2 stitches on hold. 1, 2, and then I'm going to be placing these 2 on the needle. Make sure this is tight, and then get my main yarn from here. And now I'm going to start working an I-cord. So I will knit the first stitch, and then I'm going to knit this stitch together with this first stitch here through the back loop. So I'm going through the back loop of both stitches, knitting them together like so. And I'm going to make sure everything is nice and tight so that we don't have a loose edge here. Placing those back on the needle, and I'll repeat those steps. So I'll knit the first one, and then I'll go in through the back loop of that stitch and in through the back loop of that stitch, and then I'll knit those 2 together, make it nice and tight, place them back on the needle, and repeat. And we're going to repeat all the way till the last 2 stitches, and then we're going to be doing something slightly different, so stay tuned for that. So here we are. We have worked all the way till we reach the 2 last stitches on the needle. So what we're going to be doing now is that we're going to sort of be merging these together. So I'm going to knit one, and then to make sure that there's not a gap here, I'm going to be knitting these 2 together like so. And then I'm going to be knitting the last one. A little strand there went away. And then we can, since this is the beginning, we have a thread here, so we can tug on that and it will look nice and neat. Now I'm going to start working these 3 stitches. I need to find the right. So I'll be placing these back on the needle and then working with 3 I-cord stitches from now on. So 1, 2, 3. Place these back on the needle and repeat. 1, 2, 3. Give a little tug. Place it back on the needle. And one thing that's important to know about these I-cord straps, it's that they tend to stretch quite a lot. So be mindful of that. Once you've come to a length that you think is good, know that it will probably stretch even further as you wear it, especially since this is going to be holding the whole weight of the garment. It's bound to stretch a little bit, so just keep that in mind. So we are going to repeat that until we have achieved our desired length for our straps. And now we're going to start working these ones. So I'm going to be putting these 2 and these 2 back on the needle. Okay, so now we've got the 4 stitches for the I-cord here on the needle. We're going to be doing something very similar to what we did on the other side. So here we knit 1, we knit together through the back loop, and then we knit 1. And we're going to be doing, on this side, we'll be knitting 1, we're gonna do SSK for this one and then knit 1. And the reason that I'm doing it different is just so that it sort of folds differently over and it allows us to hide this gap a little bit more. Previously I did knit 2 together here and there was quite a big gap. So if we do the SSK, we will avoid that. So let me show you. We'll attach our yarn and we will knit the first stitch, and now we're going to do an SSK. So I have a little bit of a different method for SSK. I go into the first stitch as if to knit, then I go in through the back loop of the second stitch purlwise, so it looks like this, and then I pull up a loop through this, so it looks like that. I'm going to show you. So go into the first stitch as if to knit, go in through the back loop of the second stitch, pull through a loop like so, and then I'll knit the last stitch. And you see how that sort of folds over that way. So we really make sure to avoid the gap that way. So now we place these 3 stitches back on the needle. So now we are just going to be knitting these 3 stitches like so, making sure that our threads are nice and tight here. We're going to place the 3 stitches back on the needle and work them again. And we're going to continue doing this until we have a strap that's the same length as our first strap. Stitch by pulling the yarn through. We've got a tapestry needle, and now I'm going to connect these 2 stitches because as you can see there's quite a big gap here. So I want to emulate that knit loop that a knit stitch has. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to go through that second stitch. You can see that a loop is starting to form here. We've got half of the loop, and to complete the loop I'm gonna go into that first stitch like so. So from above, pulling the yarn through. So now you can see we've got a nice little knit stitch here.